And Bill, are you going to go out and check on the your
Yep.
checkout on YouTube that's coming through? Great, thank you very much.
Will do.
All right, good evening, everyone. We are now back in open session, and next up on our agenda is the communications and board calendar. As we previously discussed, we are not going to be reading public comments during the Zoom meetings. However, we do receive and read and save comments to the district's correspondence log. So feel free to reach out to us via email, and we will continue to read and respond via email as well. Board calendar. John, is there anything you would like to share with us about that?
No, nothing new. I had shared in one of my board messages, but that early dismissal time will still stick as an early dismissal so that teachers in K-6 have an opportunity to work on their progress reports. That was a question the last time around, so I just wanted to clarify that, but nothing else.
Okay. Anybody else have anything regarding the calendar? Okay, then reports from superintendent and staff. Dr. Simpson, response to COVID-19.
Yeah, just wanted to, again, just kind of do our regular update with the board regarding COVID-19 and just what our response has been. And so I'll give some people a different opportunity to weigh in. Katina Lyles is here, thank you. The head of our SSD partnership, the administrator, responsible administrator. So she'll be able to share a little bit about how students with IEPs are being served through the process. What I will say is that, I think things continue to go well overall in the district. It's not without a lot of the challenges. It's not at all perfect. When you're trying to service kids who aren't in front of you, it's really, really hard. And I think for some kids, it's a lot harder than others, as well as for some teachers too. We're seeing just the mental health effect on teachers. One of the things that we're thinking as we continue to try and improve our practices regular is we're spending a lot of time thinking about both the summer and beyond into how do we re-enter into school, and knowing that when the time is for school to open, that we just don't have everybody walk through the door and say, okay, go to class. And so we've been talking about that a lot as a school district, and we also are having regional meetings now on a weekly basis to talk about how does that possibly look. Some of the challenges that we're facing is, one, again, we're not epidemiologists, so we're not experts in disease management or anything. And it's clear that health departments are not consistent or not all reading the same playbook in terms of guidelines for possible reentry. So for example, I've heard reports for one particular health department, county health department, that they are thinking of restricting students, making sure that each student in a space has at least 30 square feet. So this particular area, the school district, not St. Louis County, just speaking to, like, they felt their classrooms would be big enough to accommodate that, but that they were worried about lunchrooms and things like that. How would we do that? Would we be able to have extracurriculars? And then you have other health departments that are talking about possibly throwing out the idea of them determining whether a school can open or not. So St. Louis County has always told us all along that they're not going to tell us whether or not they can open, but they would help guide our decision making. So we've asked St. Louis County, the health department, if they would develop some guidelines to support our reentry. So that's what we'll be doing there. So with that, I will turn it over to my team. There were some different inquiries and have them each have a chance to respond. So whoever wants to dive in, dive in.
I'll go. So good evening, everyone. Some of the questions that were posed were wanting to know specifically, and just to review some of the things that were changes as far as graduation requirements for our seniors. There are a lot of things across the state that students have to go through. And the state did a lot of work in waiving a lot of those requirements. So for this year's seniors, they waived the requirement of them having to go through the CPR and the Heimlich maneuver training. They no longer have to show that they passed the Missouri and the US Constitution test, if that was still pending for them, as well as the civics assessment for all seniors. And then for if you were a graduating senior and you still had EOCs that you were planning to take, those would be waived for them as well in order to allow them to graduate without concern. In addition, it's not for seniors particularly, but some of the other things that were waived, the end of the year dyslexia assessment for our kindergarten through third grade students, that has been waived for the end of the school year, as well as the PE assessments for our 5th and I believe 8th grade students that are required every year. That has been waived as well. Any questions around those? Okay.
Sorry, Chris. Apologies.
That's okay.
Trying to find the unmute button, the things like that. So can you? We had a note from that's in the correspondence log, I think, from Amy Wilson, that outlined some instances and some concerns that she had, and I suspect she's by no means the only one who has a child who's having who's finding that away from sort of the people sort of seeing him daily and seeing their child daily, being able to sort of respond. Is there anything, so I appreciate what you said in terms of the state waiving various things. I'm wondering, to the extent that a child has not done as well in this environment, is there anything that we can do? Perhaps there's something we can do after sort of, graduation might normally have occurred to try to help that child get back on track. I'm concerned that a child that's, the case that's that is mentioned there, was sort of getting through and was managing to sort of keep levels together and really, and she acknowledges it's her child's, there's a lot of fault for her child is not keeping up with things, but nonetheless, what is there realistically that as a district we can do to try to help in that situation?
Well, I think in that particular situation, I've talked with Dr. Irvin and at length about that particular situation and about our grading policy as a whole. In that particular situation, they have, since that email came out, the staff has worked with that particular family. There might have been.
Chris, can I interrupt you? I apologize. Yeah. I just want to make sure that we're all really careful. We're talking about individuals here, and that really shouldn't be discussed in open session. So if you can be as general as possible about what the district is doing, but avoid talking about a specific situation.
Thank you.
Amy, I apologize. I should have been mindful of that, and I should have phrased it differently. So my apologies there.
Okay.
Just be careful going forward. Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you.
I think the grading that we've put in place for the high school is that no harm, hold harmless grading, so that if the achievement that was being obtained prior to distance learning is better than what is occurring during the distance learning portion, whatever is the highest, it will be the grade that is achieved. And so what we have talked with the administrators about is that we want to, first of all, make sure that the teachers are reaching out to any student who might be struggling, and making sure that we're doing everything we can. I am of the take that I would rather err on the side of what is best for kids rather than err on the side of 100% following the curriculum, right? Everybody is dealing with this in their own way, and they have their own situations at home. And so I've been assured by Dr. Irvin and all the principals that children will not be penalized I would rather give them the benefit of the doubt for the different types of grading and the different lessons that are going on at this time. Did I answer your question, David?
Yes, you did. Thank you very much.
Okay. Keita, did you have a question?
I did, and then I kind of thought better of it. The question was going to be, why did they cancel the U.S. Constitution? But then I kind of thought about it. I was like, well, there's probably no really good feasible way to give it, and so I assume that's why.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And that was from the state.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I also wanted to just quickly talk about, we did send out an online survey to our community. We received over 1,000 responses. Lots of information, all of that information and the survey results have been shared with the building principals. Overall, there were a lot of thanks given to our staff. Just a lot of gratitude. Thank you. We feel supported. There was a mixture of people indicating that this is an overwhelming time, that it's hard to balance if you're working from home and helping your children. And there was a mixture of people requesting more work, people requesting less work, and just different suggestions around how instruction can look. So again, that information has been shared with our administrative staff and to see, and it's also been shared for their specific site so that they can see trends that that might be particular to one school but not another, that those adjustments can be made. Any questions around curriculum or learning? Okay.
Hi, everyone. I guess I can go. Sandy, I hope everybody's doing well and taking care of yourselves. So just wanted to answer some possible questions or inquiries regarding staffing and hiring. So we are still hiring during this season. Most of our principals are utilizing Zoom and/or phone conversations in order to process with applicants. So we're still getting them in, still screening them and going through a process. So you will see a couple of hires on the board report tonight. I am still following the processes that we would typically follow with regard to checking references, as well as verifying that our new hires, with the new disclosure that we have, the mandate, we are further investigating that and ensuring everything is well with regard to our new staff members that we're hiring, not having any improper or illegal activities or behaviors with children. So we are still going through and following the process as thoroughly and fully as we can. We do go to the office just to make sure that we are receiving the documents via fax or whatever we may need. So we're following that process. We're also kind of tightening up and having more conversations with the different employee groups just to ensure that everybody is working and everything is kind of matriculating through. So for example, aides in some buildings have their own Google Classroom where they have created different strategies or instructional components for students. Some of the aides are assisting other classroom teachers in their instruction, so it just kind of depends upon the school. Our maintenance staff has been working and been kind of in constant rotation with checking our buildings. They have a schedule. Our custodial staff will begin working tomorrow. We have devised a schedule and are working to still develop a schedule for our staff to be able to gain access to the school. Some staff members, the last time they were there, they did not pick up all of their instructional materials. And so, of course, they need access to those. And in addition, there's going to be some professional development opportunities that they would need some materials for. So we are scheduling time starting tomorrow, actually, for our staff to make access in the school to pick up items and kind of, we can't close out classrooms as effectively as we used to, in a regular school year. So we are going to close out as best we can. So they will be afforded an opportunity to kind of organize their space, as well as a schedule has been devised for students at some point in the future to be able to access the classroom to pick up their items. We are checking in with people. We have heard about some of our staff members that may be struggling with this time. You know, some of our staff members, of course, may live alone or may have family members who have been negatively impacted by this virus. And so it is impacting people in a variety of ways. And so we are definitely reaching out. We emailed again and let people know about the options that we have for counseling, as well as live health online, as well as just resources that they have within each other and in the school. So we were going to continue to do that and work on that daily, just to make sure that everybody's doing well. For the people that have to come back, our custodians, we have communicated with their supervisors and said if someone has a medical condition or is in that high risk category, have them reach out so we can make sure that we're supporting them as well as we go through this time. So it's been very busy. We are asking people to disclose if they are exhibiting symptoms before they actually enter the schools or their location, and providing people with masks as well as gloves as they're processing through the school and picking up their items. So there's kind of a lot going on and matriculating through. And this week as well, we will be working to get all of these support staff employment letters out so they can have those via the electronic system. So we're very grateful for Paycom that we got approved, that allows us to issue all of the letters of employment and contracts electronically. That was great in that we're not having to worry about paper and everybody's receiving their letter of employment and contract in a timely fashion. So are there any questions related to anything that's something that I failed to mention, something that you'd like to hear?
Sandy, I don't know if you I don't know that you omitted it, but I'm curious for our staff that aren't full-time.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what I'm thinking about are maybe our crosswalks, our crosswalk guards, and our adventure staff.
Adventure Club. Mm-hmm.
Adventure Club, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak anything to kind of how their experience is throughout this? Are they feeling supported? My guess is, I don't know.
Yeah, I think they are to a certain degree, but I think they understand and know that, you know, especially for Adventure Club, with us not having summer school, we're not needing Adventure Club staff. And so I think the reality of, you know, possibly applying for unemployment and some of those other components are becoming, you know, even more real for them as we enter into the month of May. Is that next week or at the end of this week? We're in May. And so we are scheduling a time to try to get with them and get before them to provide them with any support. If they file for unemployment, it will not be, you know, we will make sure we process and retreat everything as respectfully and as timely as we possibly can. I do know, unfortunately, that the unemployment system has been overburdened and has crashed a couple of times. And so we have heard from some of them, and they're letting them know as soon as we get whatever we can and get everything through per their request. But there is some anxiety there, and rightfully so. More so, I think, from our Adventure Club staff than anything else. And so, you know, how do you provide support and what do? You can't bring people in to talk to them, to reassure them. You know, you're over the phone or sending an email, which is really, really hard. And so we're just trying to, so today we connected an employee with another employee that were friends, but they just hadn't talked. And it was like, you know, maybe we can do this to kind of help. And so when you're not around people, you kind of forget, like if you're a month removed now, if not more. And so just trying to find some different ways, but unfortunately it just, you know, the timing is what it is and we're moving closer to that point. So I don't know. It's very hectic for a number of them and for all of us.
Yeah. Well, they certainly have our support. And thank you, Sandy, for the work.
Mm-hmm. Right. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Good evening. From the business office side of things, we've been working still to keep our invoices paid, making deposits. Of course, we're running payroll, keeping everyone paid. Sandy mentioned the maintenance department is working, the custodial staff starting back this week. I also wanted to mention too that some of our employees have, stepped up and they're helping us do things that they normally wouldn't do. For instance, we have a maintenance employee. Since all the buildings aren't open and all of our shipments can't be delivered to the building, that person has worked with Federal Express and UPS. They're going to pick up those packages for us and bring us to the service center. They also come to the central office and sort our mail by department for us, which is not something someone in the maintenance department would normally do. So we do have instances like that too, where people are stepping up and doing other things out of the normal to help us get through this time right now. I also wanted to share too, I talked about this a little bit last time. There are some savings that we're watching, and we're monitoring the budget because we have some areas we're going to save. We have some areas where we will not have savings. But we're looking at our energy savings. We may save some money with our substitute cost, with our trash pickup, because we've got all those buildings down now to 1 pickup per week instead of 3 or 4. We're going to have some budgets where people haven't spent all of their money. We're going to save money on overtime. We're going to save money on some transportation costs. But then on the revenue side of things, we're watching things like what is going to happen with sales tax. Is that going to come in where we expected it to happen? What's going on with our interest income? Our meals, obviously we don't have students eating every day at the school, so we're not bringing in the revenue that we did for meals. So all of those things too that we are monitoring. So I guess that's all that I had to report on. I don't know if you had any questions for me from the business or operations side of things.
I don't have a question, but I will just comment that I love hearing that we're being resourceful about keeping people busy, and that our folks are willing to pitch in and do things that may not be in their job description. I think that's great. David, did you have a question?
So I was just going to ask, I mean, to the extent that sales taxes, I mean, presumably they are undoubtedly going to come in lower than expected. At what point are you going to think about doing budget reprojections to sort of reflect the impact of the various positives and negatives that you've described?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I was looking at bringing that to the board in either May or June, because we will have some adjustments. The thing is, right now, we don't know what's going to be adjusted. Desi's not sure either exactly what's going to happen. We had a conservative number in sales tax. I was hoping that was going to hold through the end of the year, but I'm not so sure about that right now. Unfortunately, even Desi doesn't know, so we don't have good numbers really to share at this point.
Okay, thank you very much.
I have a question. It actually might be more for Sandy though, and it's just about do we have? I know that Mrs. Keller mentioned the Adventure Club employees. I'm just wondering if there's any other employees or administrators that we've had to furlough or anything of that sort that we're able to speak to or not?
Yeah, no, we've not. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
We have not had to furlough anyone currently at this time. We have been working our best to try to not do that, but we do understand and know that that time will come to an end at the end of the school year. And so we are just kind of trying to prepare and develop and really think through those employee groups and what that will look like. The other question is that we're having to consider is that you do have some coaches who begin work with students in the summer for those fall sports. And what that would or could look like. If not, if we're not back, if we are back, and what are those things are gonna look like. So summer workers is another component. We typically have high schoolers that come and help. They may paint or help do some exterior work, cutting grass or things like that. Will we be able to do those things? I don't know holistically. So currently, right now, I think we're okay. I think once we hit the end of May, the reality of those employees, potentially them, having to file for unemployment or whatever that is, will become a reality. And then what will those midsummer, early fall employment look like for those people that typically were in place but may not be? But I don't know what the order will be or what St. Louis County will have for us around that time. So it's hard. It's extremely hard. I know our current governor's orders in place through May 3rd, I believe. So once those adjustments are made, what adjustments will be made for St. Louis County? And then what are those implications for us and what that date is? So it's really hard for me to help assist them in a lot of ways because I don't have definitive dates to work with. But right now, I think we're okay. It's that end of May, early June that we will have more people negatively impacted.
Thank you, Dr. Wiley.
Is there, and I know you've probably thought a lot of this through, is there any way to, I hate to use the word repurpose, but I mean, could there be, like, just like you said, some of the maintenance guys are stepping up and doing other stuff. Could there be other things throughout the district that maybe some of the adventure club people could, you know what I mean, kind of step in and do so that maybe they're not as negatively impacted?
Yeah, we can think that through. Marty and I have not had an in-depth conversation with regard to that as of yet. But the part of that problem is that their work primarily is with students. And so when you take the student component away, then all that's kind of left is planning or preparation or et cetera. But you have adventure club managers, you have adventure club assistant managers that could in essence be doing that work. So it's difficult because that's their, they're there because children are there. And when you take that out of the equation. So I know that we have been thinking through, and I know that, sometimes that training that you would do in the summer, maybe you're going to do it now. Things that you didn't have time to do, you're trying to knock that out now, but then what does that leave for the summer, right? Because you kind of filled up that time now. So it's just really icky, for lack of a better word, right now.
Understood.
But we will continue to think it through and see if something else presents itself, what that could or would that look like.
I think that's a situation we're just kind of as school districts all facing right now. Is our approach has been pretty consistent with other places, and with what a lot of people are saying that there'll likely be another peak in the fall. How do you we were thoughtful and just around our office here doing cross training with different people, just not knowing who might get sick or who might be caring for somebody who's sick. Now we already did that in advance, a lot of our operations in advance of COVID-19, but that's something that we've had to be much more sensitive to. Sherry's helping out in the business department right now, trying to support them with some different things. And so I think we have to be mindful of just how do we do it now, but then how do we do it moving forward and being flexible with staff. And again, you think of something like Adventure Club that, when I give those restrictions that a health department shared, well, one, we've got this goal we've been trying for years to try and make that an accessible program to everybody. But we'll have 150 kids in a program that primarily meets an elementary school cafeteria, a gymnasium, in these spots. Well, in August, how does that even look? Will we even know? So how do we communicate that? How do we staff for what could be a program that maybe is more limited compared to its existing right now, and knowing that the parents won't be happy with that, understandably, because they need childcare. So it's just the amount of stuff that we're having to problem solve and think through at this moment is pretty remarkable. But we definitely know that we only have so much funding and we've got to be resourceful.
Mhm.
So we have to make decisions.
Speaking of the second or possible second peak, one of my questions was, are there thoughts for parents, families who may not want their kids to come back to school? Maybe they're still kind of worried, like, will distance learning be available as well as being able to come into the building? Or like,
Yeah.
I know that's probably a lot, and extra lot. But
It's a good question though, Keita, because I have heard from a parent who's a little bit uncomfortable that even if restrictions are lifted, I still want to be comfortable having my child come back. How will you support me? We'll certainly do everything we can to support that child. And, you know, with kind of where things are at the state level now, children have access to our online learning. So any child can actually do that right now, elementary school age through high school age, take coursework through launch right now. And so that's a lot of what our summer program is probably going to look like. We're moving that way, but that will be an option. There's been some discussion. I've been in conversation with people who have wondered, you know, will more people stay at home? But I think there'll be some people that might be just worried for the safety of their kids. But I've heard from more people who are like, have greater respect for the hard work that teachers do.
absolutely. That's me.
And I do think too that we will see likely probably an increase to what we saw in 2008, 2009 with the turn in the economy. We saw a lot more people. Remember, we were number 2 in the region in terms of private public school children that came into our school system due to the change in the economy. And then the product that we provide in Webster is good. So once they were here, they stayed. So that'll be another thing which will have, it's always good, but again, maybe increasing your size a little bit. So that option does exist for parents who want it. It did so even before we started this online learning.
Right. Thank you.
Yep. Katina, do you want to jump in? You haven't had a.
Sure.
Appreciate you being here.
Thank you. I'm Katina Lyles, the Director of Special Education. And Dr. Simpson and I touched bases, and he asked if I could share a bit about what programming looks like for students with IEPs. So as we were talking about earlier, I'll give some examples, but I wouldn't be specific enough that it might identify a student. In general, students with IEPs are accessing learning plans in the same way, using the same types of resources as students without IEPs. So they're using some of the same learning platforms like Google Classroom and Zoom, for example. Of course, our goal is to keep students connected with teachers and engaged in learning activities. So any students and families that required access to technology for learning, depending upon the situation, you know, if it was a device or a hotspot, Webster Groves School District provided that as they did for students in general. But if it was something that was specific to a student's IEP, like a specialized device, then Special School District provided that, and many of those students took those devices home. That could have been an iPad, it could have been a talker or a computer or an enlarged screen, for example. And some of the ways that students have accessed, one example is, I'm thinking of a population of students who have more significant needs during the typical school day, would need adult supports to navigate the environment. And in a couple of classes that come to mind, all of those students are actually accessing online learning. They are attending Zoom meetings. Many of the students are responding with Flipgrid on Google Classroom, so interacting and communicating with both their teachers as well as with their peers. From the material standpoint, students and families that are unable to access, they may be provided that via an email. There are not very many cases where students have needed something mailed home or brought to them, but that has happened and that has been provided in those cases. Another good example is I'm thinking of some of our elementary students who require more visual aids to access their work. And so we may be providing those for a family via email for them to print out, but then you would have someone who might model for the parent how to use a first then chart, where basically a student who accesses a structured day and they know what's coming next. It would help support that parent in how to use that with a child. So that might happen via a Zoom session with the parent for modeling, and then also there are opportunities to Zoom with students as well. I saw a couple people pop up, so I'm wondering if there are probably some specific questions. One other example I thought I would share is around that assistive technology I touched on a bit later. We have some students who just have augmentative communication devices in order to access their learning. So if a student had a talker at school because they were not verbal, they have that talker at home. They have access to that talker at home as well. So we have really worked similarly and partnering with Webster Groves School District to ensure that we're getting that feedback from parents and learning what's going well and what's not going well. We're seeing some of the same, as in you may have a parent who says too much, no more for me, and you have a parent that may say, I want more. And so the key here for us is just continuing to communicate so that we find out more about individual needs of students and parents as we process through this time.
Katina, this is Christine, and I just wanted to say thank you. I know when I was at Fonfon and I helped to prepare undergraduates for special education roles as a career counselor, I noticed that a lot of students who were going into those fields were pretty disciplined and pretty structured. And I know that what they're having to do now is to really express a completely different side, which is flexibility and creativity. I hear my husband every once in a while meeting with special ed teachers, with students, and the amount of flexibility and creativity they're showing has really been remarkable. So thank you, and thank them for me.
Thank you for that compliment. That is a good description of us. And we have worked to just kind of overcome that piece of, you know what, we are doing this together. And in some instances, we have to say, oh, that didn't work, and then make a change and course correct so that we can do what's needed for our families. Yeah. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katina. I agree. And I also just wanted to share my appreciation for you being on the call tonight. I feel like we don't often get to hear enough about what SSD is doing with Webster. And of course, it's a team effort. So really appreciate you sharing your perspective with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else for? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I'll conclude then with this portion of the agenda. I was asked to share a few things about what's going on at the high school in terms of finishing up the school year. So I'll share a couple things that have occurred already and some upcoming things. So many of you are aware that the Parents Club sponsored parades through our various communities where our children reside last week, and Dr. Irvin reports that that was really successful. First night they did it, it was just a handful of cars, but it grew and grew. Said it was a lot of fun. They, along with the parade, they asked some of the retiring teachers to participate. And I spoke to one who was a little reluctant to do it in the get-go, but did it and was really appreciative that he did it. So I know it was loud because even though I don't have any seniors that live on my street in my little corner of Webster Groves, I could tell when they were in the area. So by all reports, that went well. Saturday was the annual Shamel Run, and this year they did it virtually, and they had approximately 230 participants join, and they raised approximately $12,000 for that. So that was a success. Senior awards, they're preparing for that event, and they're going to handle that similarly to the way they handled the Top Hat Awards, where they're producing a visual presentation, and they'll be able to push out to families to honor those seniors who are being honored. Yearbooks we've done what we need to do on our end for the yearbooks. It's completed. Dr. Urban says it's going to be a great product, but understandably there's some delays on the production side of things. So when the yearbook company lets us know that those are available, we'll figure out a way to get those to the kids. Senior checkout will be happening shortly. Finals and checkout will be happening the 6th, 7th, and 8th of May. And then the finals for the rest of the students will be the 18th through the 21st. And then the high school is also going to communicate to families about how kids can pick up items that they may have left behind in lockers or in classrooms and so on. And then I think you all are aware of this as well. There are 2 alternate dates that we've set up for graduation to take place at Chaffetz Arena. First choice is June 26th. If that doesn't pan out, then July 24th is the backup for that. And then if for some reason we're not able to be in person for either of those dates, they're looking into a virtual option.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Thanks everybody for that thorough update. I appreciate it. Does anybody have additional questions? All right, hearing none, I'm going to move on to, or actually Pam's going to move on to food service program changes.
Share my screen here.
Pam, you sounded kind of robotic there.
Still sounding that way?
A little bit.
Do you want to try turning off your video for a moment? That may that you may get better reception, then you won't be using as much bandwidth. No, that's not working.
I am going to log out and back in.
She said she's going to log back
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, I heard that part.
Can you please say, Luke, I am your father?
That's good. This is why I now do all my Zooms in the office. Hard.
John, is there anything you want to, I don't know, contribute before Pam pops back in and save her some time?
Yeah, I think, well, on the food service piece, Nancy, do you want to jump in? Also, Nancy's here, our food service, our wonderful food service leader. Nancy, can you hear me? Oh.
Yeah, she is.
Pam's back on too. Pam?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Better.
Yes.
Good to go.
Okay. Try to share my screen. Okay, I assume everyone can see the PowerPoint.
Yeah, I can see it.
Thank you.
I'm presuming others can too.
I can see it.
So the Webster Grove School District has been very fortunate and hasn't had to raise their lunch prices in several years, in 5 to 6 years. With the increase in meal prices that are suggested, the district will be able to keep up with the higher food cost and the minimum wage increases that are coming down the line. The minimum wage for Chartwell's needs to be $12 by January 1st of 2023. Right now, they have some employee categories that are starting at $10 an hour. So lower meal prices, we do have lower meal prices than other districts. And I've got to, hold on a second, move this. We're also looking at raising the prices, but still trying to keep those prices low for our families. One of the things too, and we'll talk about a little bit further, is we right now don't have, like in the budget this year, there was no budget for repairing or replacing any equipment. So if we were able to increase the price, that would help with that also. So each year, DESE releases the paid lunch equity tool to help with increasing meal prices. And then it helps so that the meal prices are not too high for the families. The tool looks at the full price lunch sold in October of the previous year. Webster's total full paid lunches in October of 2019 was 18,860. For an average monthly revenue in 2019, it was at $2.75 was 51,315. Just increasing that to $2.85 could increase monthly revenue by $1,866 per month. So here's our current prices. Breakfast is at $1.70, lunch at $2.75. So then the suggested price would be raising breakfast at elementary to $1.75, secondary breakfast to $1.80, elementary lunch to $2.80, secondary lunch to $2.85, and then a tiered pricing, which is a new thing at the high school, to $3.50. So in the high school tiered pricing, the tiered pricing would be available to all students. Items that are made to order would be included in the tiered pricing, and the prices for the tiered pricing would be $3.50. And then the meals would be entered into the SIS system, the same as the same method that meals are entered now. So some of the benefits. So for the students, it's going to increase quality, increase variety, and they'll have more customization options. For the district, it's going to increase participation, help balance expenses. We'll have a higher profit margin. This year, right now, our year-to-date totals, we are $33,000 in the red. We are expecting that to have a slight profit by the end of the year. But as I mentioned earlier, there's nothing in the budget for any equipment repairs or purchases. Another benefit would be that it increases the program quality. It keeps students on campus during lunch. And then for Chartwell's, there's also benefits of increasing the program quality, increasing student satisfaction, and increasing client satisfaction. So here's a sample of a tier at the high school. So the base would be a chicken patty sandwich. The tier 1 would be all white meat chicken sandwich, grilled, breaded, and spicy. Then tier 2 would be a homemade panini sandwich with all white meat chicken. And you can kind of see the different options there too. I won't read all of them to you. Then another option here would be a base would be a turkey and cheese sub sandwich, a ham and cheese sub, sun butter and jelly sandwich, or you could have tier 1, which is roast beef and Swiss, grilled all white meat and chicken club, homemade white meat chicken salad sub, or the tier 2 would be the vegetable muffaletta. And please don't ask me what that is. We'll have to have Nancy explain that. Or a roasted vegetable panini, or turkey and bacon club panini. And another suggestion would be the base would be spaghetti and meatballs with green beans and dinner roll. Tier 1 would be build your own pasta bar with pasta noodles, chicken or meatballs, Alfredo or marinara, fresh roasted or sauteed vegetables, or a Caesar salad and a garlic breadstick. Tier 2 could be an Asian bar with fried rice or lo mein, General Tso's chicken, roasted broccoli and our Asian vegetables, an egg roll, and a fortune cookie. So the tier pricing, Kirkwood started this program and it was very successful. The average daily participation increased by 4.8%, reimbursable meals increased by 24%, and sales increased by $31,587 from the prior year. And then we're just going to give a report here, and Nancy chime in if you want. Nancy's doing an incredible job at the Hudson meal program going on right now. They're currently feeding 200 to 250 students per day. They're rotating between hot and cold options. They're delivering meals to 70 students or 24 families. They have 2 to 3 volunteers that are helping every day, just amazing. The survey shows they've got a total of 308 people signed up, and they're utilizing as much product on hand as possible. So do you have any questions for us?
Joe, did you have a question?
I don't have a question. I was just going to say,
I don't have a question.
huge thank you to Nancy
Right.
for the Hudson program and feeding those kids that otherwise would not have the meals that they're getting. That's a great service.
You're welcome.
The delivery, that's amazing.
Yes.
So nice.
Okay, well, Joe beat me to it, so so good. I just echo what Joe said.
And I'll just make my obligatory and predictable comment that I'm happy to see so many vegetarian options at the high school. Keep it up.
Thanks.
Now, if you can just find a way to get the kids to eat them, that will be truly.
No,
that will
mine
truly be
always
the moment.
wanted them and couldn't find them. So I think there are a lot more kids that want that than you would think. So
No, it's wonderful. It's out there and great to offer it.
Yeah, we definitely have some takers at all levels, so it's a good thing.
good.
Nancy is fantastic. Nancy, would you even just briefly share them on what your kind of project with Dr. Banks is that you're working on?
Yes. So for our equity project with Dr. Banks, we have, mine was to make meals more equitable to our students, which includes, haven't got a finalized plan, but we're working on having specialty meals, not just, okay, so it's soul food today, but having it throughout the menu so that they can see different ethnic groups and different types of foods throughout the school year, different times of the year, getting students involved, parents involved as much as we can to make meals more equitable for all of our students.
Thanks, Nancy.
Very cool.
Is that at every level? Grade school and high school?
Yes.
That's awesome.
Is that like, I've often thought it'd be kind of cool if you were doing like multicultural meals that you also kind of maybe learned a little bit about that culture. Like, is that kind of part of it? Or you just offering the different meals? Is that?
Yes, we could definitely make it part of that. Last year, Julie Wolk at Edgar did This Is How We Roll. It was a book of how kids eat and learn in different cultures. And we did a little bit with food service along with the book in it. So I think we could definitely work with principals and get that through the curriculum as well.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Thanks for all you do, Nancy. There's a motion for the meal prices.
I'll make a motion to approve the following new meal prices, starting with the 2020-21 school year. Elementary breakfast, $1.75. Secondary breakfast, $1.80. Elementary lunch, $2.80. Secondary lunch, $2.85. And tiered pricing at the high school of $3.50.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, motion carries 6-0. Thank you, Nancy and Pam and your teams for this update and for all that you're doing.
You're welcome.
Okay, up next, Pam, I believe you have initial draft budget.
Yes. And before we talk about that, if you don't mind, I just wanted to talk a little bit. I know some of you probably heard that the governor announced about a week ago that there was going to be $47.2 million worth of withholdings out of this year's budget on the state level. And I thought we would just talk about that a little bit. One of the things they were going to withhold were money for out of the formula, but it's for a prior year correction. What has happened the last couple of years, growing districts should be estimating their ADA, then they can get paid in that current year on what their ADA actually is. Not all the districts estimated that, so then they didn't get their money till the next year, and it's actually a long process, but because they didn't get their money till the following year, DESE had to do what they call a prior year correction. We did not have a prior year correction in our formula fund, so I don't think that is going to affect us. The other thing, they're decreasing 7% of the transportation funding out of this year's budget, and that also is not going to affect us very much. I think it will not, we're expected to receive more than what we budgeted. The 7% would result in about a $500 reduction for us. As you know, we don't get a lot of transportation funding. So I guess that's one benefit to getting very minimal funding, is that we also have a very minimal reduction. So I just wanted to share that information. And then on another note, I wanted to share too, I know the board and probably the community too has been wondering what Mr. Bruce Ellerman has been up to. And he has been very busy this year working on projects for the district, looking for efficiencies and cost savings. And of course, he's there for me too when it was time to, for instance, look at the administrative salary structure. He was there that he could answer questions for me and then to explain that. But some of the things he's worked on this year, he started earlier in the year doing a cash flow projection and trying to see what we could do with investing some of our funds. And he actually found that it would be better to leave the money where we have most of it anyway, through the Missouri School Investment Program, since interest rates are not, as you know, very high right now, and they're probably going to be a little bit lower in the future. But he was estimating that if we could try to keep as much money in MOSA as possible, because it's a higher interest than our local bank, throughout the year, we could possibly save $40,000. Another thing he looked at is Medicaid, administrative Medicaid claiming. That's a revenue stream that the district did not have. We're starting that May the 1st, and that should bring in $15,000 to $20,000 in revenue for the district. See, another thing that he looked at was in our transportation funding. We can get additional funding by coding and make sure we're keeping track of our homeless transportation costs and the miles that are driven for homeless transportation. By adding that into the transportation formula, we should get about an additional $3,300. Another thing that he's looked at was our water and sewer invoices. As you know, sewer is based off of the water consumption. And for some of our equipment, let's say our boilers, for instance, the water goes in, it's used, it's evaporated, and it's not going back out through the sewer system. So he analyzed that. We're actually having a meter put on to measure how much that water is. And then the company is going to work with us and actually not charge us for all that as wastewater, since it's not all wastewater. The equipment is using that, or the water is evaporating. So he's estimating a savings with that of about $13,600. Also, as he was monitoring utility bills throughout the districts, he found a couple of buildings actually had a really high water usage. And after he looked at those, found in two of the buildings at Clark and at Bristol, we had some equipment that wasn't working quite right on some ice makers, causing us to use more water than we should. That could save us $5,000 a year. If that wouldn't have been fixed, it would have been about an additional $5,000 cost. Another thing he was looking at was our trash, our waste hauling invoices, our usage, trying to determine if we had the right number of pickups each week. And also looking at, should we be locking those dumpsters so other items aren't being put in the dumpsters? And also he worked with a cooperative through several other school districts, and those services are actually out to bid right now. He's estimating we could save about $16,000 through this process. Another area he looked at was our state assessed railroad and utility revenue. He researched how that is divided between the school districts, and he found that actually we get paid on our September membership, our student membership count, and it's based partially on how we put our pennies and our levy in the different funds. So he said, depending on what our budget needs are each year, if we could transfer 8 cents into the capital projects fund, we could raise about $1,250 per penny, so a total of almost $10,000. So that's something we'll be looking at when we approve the tax rate in the fall. Go on to my next page here. He's been looking at electricity usage for different things. Some things, like even just recently, he was looking at maybe if we change the light fixtures at Moss Field, we'll have some energy savings. And also looking at our rating, there's a tariff schedule, and he found that Ambrose could be on a different schedule and get a little bit lower charges. We could save $1,400 at Walter Ambrose and about $4,400 if we can replace the Moss Field light fixtures. Then one of the most recent things he did was our copy machine company. He contacted them and said, hey, right now we're not in the buildings. We don't have a very high usage. Would you be able to give us a credit? And they actually said, yes, they would. They're working with us. They said they very much value our partnership. So for the next, let's say 4.5 months, they're going to credit $4,200 a month to our bill for a total savings of $19,000 there. Altogether, the savings that he's come up with this year total a possible $169,000. Do you have any questions on that?
Well, that's certainly the most Bruce report I've ever heard without Bruce being in the room. Who else thinks to look for this stuff? That just amazes me. So good for him. Also, with regard to the suggestion to keep our money in the MOSIP program, for those of you who do not know, I am on the board of directors for that program, so we're charged with its oversight. And not only is it are they giving better interest rates, as Pam mentioned, but it's an incredibly stable and well-run organization. So kudos to Bruce for that recommendation, and I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yeah, Pam, I just had a quick question, knowing that this could potentially be a very hot topic at the MSBA annual conference. I don't know, like Bruce's best or something. But I mean, if he's looking at projects that could potentially save us over $150,000, I can't imagine that other districts wouldn't be quite interested in some of the ways that he would.
Yeah, that's a very good idea.
I just would just like to say thank you. I mean, it's great. Thanks for sort of laying out all of those things. I mean, I think again, it shows. I mean, Bruce has found value in everything he's done, and I appreciate that you and John are finding ways to utilize him to continue to save the district money. And frankly, I think also just from a governance or from a fiscal responsibility standpoint, rather, I think it's good again that if at some point Bruce comes back and says, okay, there's nothing more to be found, I think that also sends a message to our taxpayers that looking after their money and being stewards of their money is absolutely something that that you, John, and the board take very, very seriously. So thank you very much.
Okay, we're ready to move on to the preliminary budget. Let me see if I can share my screen again. Okay, can you see that? My screen is not looking right.
Yes.
Yes, you can see it.
Okay. So the budget goals. So obviously we want to provide the resources to promote a learning environment that is challenging and supportive of all students. We want to ensure there's strong fiscal and operational management. We want to maintain class sizes, and we want to incorporate the salaries that align with the goal of being 3 to 5% over the St. Louis County median. And we want to maintain a competitive employee benefit package for our employees. We'll start by looking at local revenue, and I think I need to preface this a little bit by saying, as you know, the economy has changed a lot in the last 6 weeks. Just 6 weeks ago, I would have been bringing you a budget that looked different than this one. I was hoping in my first year we wouldn't have a deficit, but with some of the things going on, I think that is going to happen. But as you know, the budget in the district is in very good financial shape right now. We have a nice fund balance and we have reserves. The budget is in about a $500,000 deficit. That is in alignment with the projection that was made a year ago for this year's budget. But things had improved over the last year and we didn't think that was going to happen, but that is where we are today. So we'll start talking about current and delinquent tax revenue. Estimated an increase of about 1%. That has a collection rate of 97.8%. What I did was I used the average increase of assessed valuation over the last 3 years in the non-reassessment cycle. The last 2 non-reassessment cycles saw an increase of 1.7 and 1.8%. So we're hoping the 1% is a conservative number. That's an increase in operating revenue of about $400,000. And this revenue stream is expected to be about 63.5% of the total operating budget. So continuing with local revenue, our proxy sales tax originally thought we were going to see an increase. Desi was estimating that we would be able to estimate approximately $1,065 per ADA. Our ADA we're using is 4,211. They have not given us a guidance telling us exactly what that number is going to be. They are telling us, though, to be conservative. I've dropped that down to 985, which is a 6% decrease over this year. They were expecting this year we were going to hit 1,049 per ADA. In our budget, we have 1,015 per ADA. So dropping that for next year to 985 per weighted ADA. Then our M&M surcharge, that account has been receiving several $100,000 over budget, so we're increasing that. I also wanted to point out, this is a revenue stream that can be placed in whatever fund is needed as long as the board approves that. Right now we had about $140,000 this year go into the debt service fund. So this is something that we could watch in the future. And if we decide that we would be better off placing that in the operating fund, we could do that. Our student activity receipts are projected to remain flat. And then fines and state assessed utilities are also not projected to increase. Then on the state revenue side, the formula. So the formula makes up approximately 13.8% of the operating budget. I've estimated the state adequacy target to remain the same at 6,375. This is a revenue stream that in the past, the state has protected. We have no guarantees though, so I wanted to share with you. So if it would decrease, like I said, I'm using 6,375. If it would go down to 6,350, that would be a reduction of about $160,000 in revenue. And if it went down to 6,300, it would be about $342,000 reduction. So the one thing that I have reduced in this calculation is summer school. As you can imagine, we're not thinking that we can have our regular summer school, the brick and mortar summer school this year. So I've estimated a decrease in the summer school ADA by 50%. That is decreasing our receipts about $160,000 from this year's budget, or $200,000 from what is expected in this year's budget. Another state revenue, we talked about this a little bit, is transportation. So we have the things that, the coding things that Bruce had found. And then I'd also like to change some coding for our trips that we do too, and that should bring another $1,000 to $2,000 in transportation revenue. So this is an area that a lot of times the state does withhold revenue from, but it's such a small amount of our overall budget that I don't think it's going to affect us that much. Like I said, this year we're looking to lose maybe $500, and in the future, if they reduce it, it could be maybe $2,000 or $3,000, but it will not be a big revenue loss for us. Parents as teachers, originally from information I was getting a month or two ago, had increased that by $5,000. We'll continue to watch that to see if that's going to hold true or not, or if we need to keep that area flat. Federal funds, federal food service, there's no changes at this time. We're still monitoring that side of the budget, and we'll have a change for that when we bring the budget back in June for you to approve. Medicaid, I mentioned this. This is a new revenue stream that Mr. Elliman had worked on. We're estimating that'll be $15,000 next year. Then on title funding, we just found out that we're receiving an additional $25,000 in Title I funding. I haven't not put that in the budget yet because I'll need to figure out, or I won't figure it out. I'll let Chris and her department figure out what we're going to do with that money, and then we'll do a corresponding expenditure offset for that. And we'll bring that to the board in June also. Now on the expenditure side, so we have our salary improvements that I mentioned earlier with a goal of being 3 to 5% over the St. Louis County median. The teachers are 5% over the median, everyone else is 3%. We have a 4.5% estimated increase in health insurance. That's what our insurance broker is telling us right now. We will get that final number in May, and we still will take that information then to the insurance committee to make a final decision on how that should be split out and the cost sharing on that. So right now I have the 4.5% in the budget, and then we're expecting a 5% decrease in our dental insurance. Then of course, there's also increases for retirement, Social Security, and Medicare that go along with the raises. Some other expenditure considerations, our purchase services are increasing $108,000. We had some things we removed. We had a one-time payment to Paycom for the implementation of that system that was removed, and our redistricting consultant, that fee was removed. Then we had to increase it for transportation and make some for regular transportation, mainly for homeless transportation. That is a category that has really increased in the last couple of years. And we also have a consultant at Steger Gibbons in there. Utility accounts, we've increased those by 5%, and that is, most of that is going to our gas account. Our supply accounts have decreased $100,000, and that's various accounts taking away some of the rollover from last year that was in the budget, and a couple other accounts that just had a little excess in there that we could reduce. And we're going to continue to analyze all of those accounts to see if there are any other areas that should be adjusted. And if we find out that there are areas that should be adjusted, we'll bring that to the board in the June meeting when you approve the budget also. So now to look at the debt service fund, comparing the current year budget to the next year's budget, you see our revenue is projected to go down a little bit. Part of that is due to the subsidy, but I really wanted to point out the M&M surtax here is the $114,000 that was budgeted this year, estimated to be $125,000 for next year. We actually received $140,000 this year. That's the revenue stream that if we wanted to, we could move that to an operating fund. Now on the debt service expenditures, our principal payments are going up a little bit, but our interest payments are going down due to some refundings that have been done recently. So our total expenditures are 5.2 million, leaving us with a positive balance of $821,000 in the debt service fund. So in summary, total revenues are expected to go up about $460,000. Expenditures are projected to go up $975,000, creating a budget deficit of $522,000. So here, just breaking down the different categories of revenue. Our revenue is at $64 million. There's another spreadsheet in the packet that may be easier to look at than some of these screens on the PowerPoint. I won't go over all of these, but just wanted to share with you here, our current and delinquent property tax revenue is making up 64% of the budget. Proxy sales tax is 6%. The other local is at 13%. So that would be our food service lunch monies that are deposited, our student activity accounts and things like that. County is just 1% of the budget. State revenue is 15%, and federal revenue is also just at 1%. In the expenditure category, we're at a total of $64.5 million. Oh my goodness, what happened to that? So the rest of this is not showing up. That was 61% is our salary and benefits. Get my paper copy out here. I'm sorry, I have no idea what just happened there. And then health insurance is making up 8% of the total. Then other benefits are 10%. So the other benefits would be the retirement, Social Security, and Medicare. And then purchase services are the green, 10% of the budget. And supplies are the next category, the 6% of the budget. And then utilities are making up 2% of the budget, and our capital outlay is 3%. And this, again, this is in the board packet. It might be a little bit easier to read. I mainly just wanted to point out on here the bottom line, the green line. So as you can see, our operating funds are at 522,000 negative, which is about where the budget was projected last year. I hope, though, we weren't going to be at this point, but we are still analyzing accounts right now to see if we have any more efficiencies that we can put into the budget. But also on the revenue side, be very closely watching what's going on at the state level to determine if we need to make any adjustments there. And then this shows the projection going out, basically using a lot of the same assumptions from this year to the next year. Proxy, I have a 0% increase in sales tax. Current and delinquent taxes, I have it going up a little bit higher at 1.5% because it's a reassessment year, but that may not happen. It may go down depending on what happens with the economy and how long we stay in this downturn. But as you can see, the projections show that then we'll have $1 million deficit, and then the next year about 1.6 million. And here I just wanted to share, DESE calculates the fund balance just based on the general fund and the teacher's fund. We ended the 2018-19 year at a 52.18% fund balance. The budget this year, if we would receive the exact amount of revenue that's budgeted and spend the exact amount of expenditures that's budgeted, we would end up with a fund balance of 50.08%. Obviously, that's most likely not going to happen. We're going to have expenditures that are not spent, and it does look like our revenue is going to come in over budget, so that fund balance should go up and be closer to the 52% where we were at last year. And then the forecast for 2021, and again, that is just an estimate right now, but it shows it dropping down just slightly from the previous year. So, what questions do you have for me?
No questions for Pam?
I was going to say I don't have any I don't have any questions, but again, I just want to thank you for the again a very complete presentation in terms of where things are going. Obviously, it is a time of flux, and we look. Obviously, when you get a better idea, I know you'll come back with just some more presentations and more information for us. And I guess, yeah, I mean, the property taxes is the ones that once you know some more, I mean, if we just think in terms of where our revenue comes from and what the impact there of a decline will be, so in the light of Hancock and things like that, I think just, when you can share more with us, certainly be interested in hearing that. So thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Pam. At this point, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I make a motion that we approve consent agenda items 5.02, 5.03, 5.04, 5.05, 5.06, 5.07, 5.08, 5.09, 5.10, 5.11, 5.12.
Second.
Right, I think I heard a motion and a second from Keita. All those in favor, aye.
I think the
Aye.
second
That
was
was-
from Joe.
Yeah, that was Joe.
Okay, from Joe. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Right, that motion carries 6-0. Rather than a motion to adjourn, I would entertain a motion to reconvene into executive session for the reasons previously stated.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please, Sherry.
Ms. Clendenin,
Yes.
Mr. Addison,
Yes.
Mrs. Dahl,
Yes.
Ms. Keller,
Yes.
Ms. Quinn,
Yes.
Mr. Khan.
Yes.
All right, thank you. We are now in exec. We'll wait until the video stops. John, is Bill on? Does he know to stop the video?
Yeah, I'll text him.
He's just coming back now.
Here, guys.
Stop the video, Bill.